So, you know what I'll briefly say in this video, which I'll keep as short as possible. But to do with the EU referendum, from the UK referendum, from the EU, basically to separate themselves. Basically, there's a reason behind that. And the reason, what I've tied in with this is, basically, first of all, you know, as soon as the UK are independent from the EU, basically, Human Rights Act 1998 of the UK, which is part of the EU referendum, EU, that can be axed, which is why David Cameron, is bringing that in, first of all. There's a reason for that, because until, as long as they stay part of the EU, the 1998 Human Rights Act has to stay, for starters. And then as soon as that's axed, they can bring in, what they've been talking about, like extremist conspiracy theorists, like me, David Icke, and his son, basically will be convicted for talking about that stuff, because they'll take away that rights to free speech, for starters. That's just one of them. And what I was saying before I actually recorded this, it doesn't make sense, extremism. Because when you look at extremists, like Muslim extremists in the UK, basically, first of all, if you see Muslim extremists, those people, they talk about violence and extreme, what you would call extremism, violence, threats. And that ties in with the Terrorism Act 2000. I mean, you listen to mine and David Icke's videos and his son. And, we don't talk any of those things that can be classed as, extremism, for starters. First of all, there's nothing violent behind them. But yeah, there's a reason all behind that. And I can tell you why. Because first of all, and I'll say this again, tying in with David Cameron, when he was saying, when people were, basically blaming him for not looking into the paedophile ringing Houses of Parliament, he said himself, and this was on mainstream news as well, basically, it's conspiracy nonsense and all that stuff, all that. And, it's a load of bullshit. Basically, conspiracy theories means nonsense. And then, around November 2014, he started trying to bring in a law, basically bringing a law, to say that what conspiracy theories are classed as are extremists and stuff. That's not right, for starters. There's something behind that. Because before, when it came to Houses of Parliament and that, and the paedophile cover-up and that, basically that was nonsense. But as soon as me and David Icke start talking about, serious things that need to be looked into, which the government should actually look into themselves, ironically, we have to speak to, without media coverage, mainstream media, we're classed as extremists and that. So to me that says it's okay for the Houses of Parliament and that to basically, not look into serious things regarding child abuse and that, and call that nonsense and conspiracy theories. But when me and David Icke and that, people like me, conspiracy theorists, critical thinkers, we talk about, stuff like that as well. All of a sudden, it's illegal and they try and class it as extremism. That's that, for starters. And what I put that across that ad. Basically, I came up with an analogy. It's like you calling the police, to report a crime. And then, all of a sudden, you get arrested by the police, for reporting that crime to them. Surely they should be arresting the criminals. And that's an example, like me and David Icke basically putting across, you know, to the government themselves and the public about crimes and us, you know, being threatened to be imprisoned for it. It doesn't make sense, does it? You know, that doesn't make sense for starters. You know, and you know, they're so desperate to bring in this law as well. For starters, you know, first of all, you know, you know, they're trying. First of all, they were trying to bring in the extremist imprisonment thing. You know, Theresa May and that didn't work, and now all of a sudden, you know, they're trying to get referendum from Europe. You know, so they can axe the 1998 Human Rights Act. You know, to basically take away those rights and legally be able to imprison people like me and David Icke. Now, why are they so desperate, you know, to do that? That they're trying to get referendum from the EU, for starters, to do that. You know, they're very desperate about something, you know, they classed as lies and bullshit before. You know, all of a sudden, you know, it's a big issue that they're going to those levels. So, you know, I just use critical thinking. And, you know, I ask myself these things mainly and try and put them across to you. You know, so, and like I said, you know, like Nigel Farage, UK Independence Party, which is UK Independence Party for a reason. You know, he was the one with those policies when it came to voting, you know, for, you know, people who follow that party. UKIP lost, Conservatives won. Who didn't have that part of their policy, you know, if they won? Independence, basically, referendum from the EU. You know, like UKIP. But now all of a sudden, the Tories, Conservatives, are trying to bring that in now all of a sudden. So, you know, there's a reason behind all those things. And, you know, you've got to ask yourself, you know, that they're so desperate to go to the levels of basically getting independence from the EU to basically, you know, bring on this law, you know, to imprison and then class me and David Icke, you know, as extremists. Therefore, again, which doesn't make sense time with the Terrorism Act 2000, where extremism is classed using violence and stuff for starters. You know, that doesn't make sense anyway. But, you know, there's a lot behind it. You know, that is a very serious level. You know, they're so desperate. And it's the same as the United States government. Of what I've heard they're doing. They're basically finding another way to shut up people like Alex Jones and that. You know, one conspiracy theorist over there. So, you know, I ask myself these questions mainly using critical thinking and that, you know, because there's a reason to it. And, you know, especially when they're not honest enough to basically say, as David Icke said himself, you know, that me and him and everyone else who speaks conspiracy theories, basically what they're saying is David Icke, people like him are speaking the truth, and, you know, we're trying to cover it up by, you know, subtly saying, you know, they're extremists that keep the public as sheep as we keep them, you know, from realising that because they don't think for themselves. That's why me and David Icke and his son and that, you know, are big threats. Basically because, you know, we think for ourselves. We're awake. We're not shackled slaves into the system. You know, when we start asking questions, you know, like David Icke, his popularity has got about over 500,000 followers. You know, and we wake more people up. We become a threat. So the only way they can try and silence us is basically by imprisoning us or bringing in a law to make it illegal, and therefore they make themselves so more obvious. You know, that they're trying to cover up the truth. And, you know, when they're there to, you know, basically where they say they're there to arrest and stop criminals, you know, it doesn't make sense when they're convicting me and David Icke as criminals for exposing criminals. You know, it's stupid, it's illogical, especially from a government. And, you know, those people who lead those governments and run the country. Same as President Barack Obama and that. You know, the United States government doing that themselves. So, you know, I ask myself that out of anyone, you know, it's up to you, you know, to see what you think about that. But, yeah, you know, that's all I leave on that. So, you know, have a think to yourself and see what you think, because, you know, there's something very sinister going on behind that itself. Cheers for listening. Signing out.